Victor, let's turn now to our presidents. I'm anxious to hear they're both the most iconic presidents, I think, in the whole panoply of presidents, Andrew Jackson and Ronald Reagan. So,
Andrew Jackson was the first Democratic, what do they call it? The era of good feelings up until his election in 1829.
yeah, he started as president. I guess the 1828 was the election, but
29. Yeah.
1828 was the election. And then he was
Yeah. He
president.
was a president till 1837, I think. Or 1837. He was the first Westerner. He was a populist, and his family came from Ireland. He almost couldn't have been president because he was the first person in that family born in the United States. They were pr- English Protestants that had gone into Ireland and then faced, you know, pushback. Came to the United States. He fought in the Revolutionary War, when he was a young man. He almost died. The British almost killed him. Killed his brother in captivity. He had smallpox. And then in one of the battles, he got shot in the shoulder, almost died. And he had a lifelong hatred of the British. He really did. And so when he moved, he was an orphan, and his older brother died. So he came westward, I guess what we would call now Nashville or somewhere in Tennessee. And his whole life was full of scandalous activity. Like he had a boarding, I'm trying to think, he had a boarding house, and he met the daughters, the head mistress of the boarding house daughter, but she was married to somebody who was in absentia, so they carried on an affair. And then they had kind of I don't know what you call it, live-in marriage, and then the husband came back, the cuckold husband, and then asked for a divorce, but the timing wasn't right. So he was having conjugal relations with a woman who was married, which is anathema. And then he did start to buy slaves. He was a land speculator. He was a House representative. He tried being senator, but he made a name as a lawyer. He taught himself law. Didn't have to go to university then. Yeah, probably better lawyers. And then he started speculating. He lost his fortune. And then he bought the Hermitage in Tennessee, and he ran for president in against John Quincy Adams. And that was the crooked deal, crooked bargain, where John Quincy, as I said, agreed to um, make Henry Clay Secretary of State because the Electoral College, nobody got the requisite number, so it went into the House of Representatives. It was a crooked deal. John Quincy Adams was president at 26, 27, 28, 29, 1829, and he was probably the first really unpopular president. He was a pedant. He was very brilliant. He knew a lot of languages, but he was very unpopular, and he shouldn't have won the election because it wasn't he. Um, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote. There were 3 candidates. He didn't get a majority, but he won the popular vote, and he would have won there was some question about the Electoral College, but he surely should have won the House of Representatives. They robbed him. So that's what he ran on, and when he was finally elected, it was the first non-aristocratic president we had and the first partisan, and he had, uh 2 or 3 agendas. I'm gonna get rid of I don't want a government bank. I don't want a bank that favors rich people by giving them cheap interest loans at the taxpayer's expense, and he got rid of it or stopped the renewal of it. And then he said, we were talking about the Louisiana Purchase, but there's a whole area in Alabama and Georgia and Florida along the coast, and that's ours, but it's under Spain, and the British now have armed the Cherokee and Choctaw and Seminole Indians, and advocated taking all of that land, and that was reified when he was president. He got legislation passed, and they displaced them. The so-called Trail of Tears, where they had to walk all the way out to Oklahoma. A lot of them died, but he was a Martin Van Buren. His proteges were Martin Van Buren and James Polk. They were expansionist manifest destiny people, and he created the southern United States. Andrew Jackson did. He became famous because of the Battle of New Orleans when he got his own militia, 2,500, and he got some people flocked to him, and they defeated a British army, really defeated it, annihilated it. And he was an anti-British. Uh, he was also famous because you would think as a Southerner, he would be for states' rights. He had slaves. He had over 100 slaves and maybe more as he got wealthy. At the Hermitage, I think, was 5 or 6, maybe it was 1,000 acres. But he was very famous for 1832, the Nullification Acts, where South Carolina said, "You impose tariffs. We can't get sophisticated equipment from England now because we Yankees up there to protect their expensive stuff they don't wanna sell us because we have slaves. We can't get it from England. It's too expensive." And they're retaliating against agricultural. So they're putting tariffs on our cotton, tobacco. And so we are not going to honor it. And Jackson said, "You are going to honor it. And I'll put federal troops in there and declare war on all of you." And that was hard to do because John C. Calhoun was a Southerner, very famous. He'd been Secretary of War. And he and Jackson clash, and Jackson won, and that was very important because he established the right until recently with sanctuary cities with this California under say, "We're not gonna follow federal law. We're not working with federal immigration. We're gonna try to defy it." But Jackson would have put him in jail. He was a very Trumpian character. He had 2 duels, 3 duels, and, one of the people shot him, and it hit his breastbone and didn't penetrate, and he killed the person. He took the second shot. The other 2, they fired up in the air. He almost died 3 times. Once in a duel, once in battle, he got a shoulder wound that was right near the artery, and then he got smallpox when he was in captivity by the British during the Revolutionary War, and yet he lived to be 78 years old. They called him Old Hickory because he had a march during the war right through a hickory forest. And so until the woke period, he was considered the age of Jackson, the populist. This was a sharp break, and if you were a Democrat, most of the liberal historians favored him. So all the books written before 1975 are pro-Jacksonian democracy, strong national defense, kind of like Henry Jackson, that 1970s politician from Washington who was a distinguished senator. Now he's hated because he had slaves. And then we go to Ronald Reagan.